Purpose of today's meeting is to have a kick on the engineering and architectural work study that are going to be done in 4 of the city facilities. And present from the Bowen Collins team that won the bid are Stephen Cohen, okay, and David Triplett, okay, and you represent kind of the combined team there.
CRSA, Bowen Collins.
Okay. And you're going to be project leader, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we have an agenda in front of us, and I think you folks actually prepared the agenda.
Yeah, you have items put into it. This is just something, these are thoughts, and so don't let it govern your questions and things. This is what we thought was necessary.
Okay.
You may have things that you want to go beyond that. So.
Well, we mainly want to make sure that we've given you the correct scope of work that we're looking for, and that you're, when you come back to report, you're able to give that information back to us. And then we understand from the scope of work that was defined, you might have additional questions, or there may be limitations as to what you are not, or were not able to perform. Like we understand there was no drills to look into spaces that were completely boxed in, things like that.
And at this point, because of this being a broad, not a detailed study, I think that's going to be unnecessary. I was able to poke my head into enough places today to see what I needed. I think same for you, Dave. I think so too.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been here since 8:30 this morning looking at facilities.
Right. Mike was out measuring when we were in here a few minutes, so that's good. Okay, just at a general level, the reason we put this out for bid is we've had lingering concerns over a multi-decade period that some of the city facilities are not in good condition for seismic, to withstand any kind of seismic event. And then perhaps also structurally, there may not be the kind of safety things that are required, or they're not up to code for what we would like to use them for. Now, we're not asking in this study for you to evaluate future types of uses that the buildings are not currently designed for. We're simply asking for what will it take, or what are the current conditions of the facilities, especially the seismic. Also, what would it take or cost, and how much time to each of those facilities up to being able to use them for their current needs. And so we'll go through each one of those individually just to make sure we're both on the same page. So probably one of the big concerns then is going to be this building behind us, which is the old recreation center. I don't know what it was used for back in the day when it was constructed.
It was the high school dance hall.
That was the high school gym. So effectively,
It was a dance hall.
a dance hall.
Yeah.
Was the gym floor added later?
The original floor was part of that dance hall.
So is that the original floor in there now?
It's underneath the overlay.
Okay. Because that floor now is some kind of bouncy floor.
It's a suspended floor underneath.
So, see, it pays to have people in the community
that are old enough.
What's that?
That are old enough to
I did
remember.
not say that. And we have seen crossbars put in with plates and big huge screws on the sides of it. We've seen marks in the face of the building, windows, door separations, etc. And there's just a concern as to whether this building is capable of being saved, what that might cost, or are we in a condition where we're beyond practical perspective of saving that. There are many in the community that would like to see that building remain, but we also have to be practical if you guys come back and tell us one way or the other.
Well, I think you'll find in the end, we're gonna give you some data that can help you make those decisions. The community value, the amount of money that you spend to retrofit it is a matter of what value that the community puts into it. So that's a judgment the community has to make.
Sure.
We won't. But we hopefully can give you enough data so that you can make some informed decisions.
All right.
In some old pictures, for the old building, there were two buildings on either side.
Can you speak up, please? I can't hear you back here.
In some old photos, there were two buildings on either side of the, old rec center. And those two buildings were removed.
Was there an interconnection between them?
I just remember seeing pictures of where there were buildings on both sides.
And the reason I'm asking that question is there's some funny toothing of masonry on the sides of the buildings. And if there was an old opening connecting it to an older building, that would maybe explain that funny toothing that we were seeing.
Have we identified a Pleasant Historical Society yet?
Chief Dave, and by the way, we have a new fire chief and his name is Dave Thomas.
Don't get that wrong again.
Okay. I grabbed it off the website for my defense.
Oh.
I thought I know. I gotta know, we're updating.
Point well taken.
Okay, so also,
Yeah.
Mark has in his office, 3 volumes.
Dave.
Dave.
Said Mark.
I won't make that mistake again. Chief Dave has in his office 3 volumes of the history of Pleasant Grove, and there are photos that go along with it, and I think that it's chronological. So that's a resource, and his office is right there.
We'd like to look at them.
And I just, one technical question.
Okay.
What is the difference between structurally sound and seismically sound? In one sentence.
A seismic event is a rare event. And so when you say structurally sound, it can stand in daily use.
Structurally sound is just
Structurally-
daily wear and tear.
Yep, daily wear and tear, but that doesn't tell you that in an extreme event it's going to perform well.
Okay.
And not to go beyond the one sentence, but there's a code, it's called the abatement of dangerous building. And seismic isn't even listed in there as a parameter for abatement of dangerous buildings. Now, the roof getting ready to collapse from snow loads or something like that would be.
Okay.
All right.
So you'll provide us with where this particular structure fits.
Yeah, well, all of these, they're standing.
Have been for quite some time.
Yes. Codes have changed greatly over the years. And the other thing you find is that wood structures, the safety factor, the code has safety. When you put a design load on it, you don't want it to be near collapse when you're loaded at the max. You want a safety factor on top of that. Concrete has about 1 2/3 safety factor, still has about 1.5 safety factor. Wood can be anywhere from 1.5 to 8, depending on, because wood's variable. They worry about knots, you worry about the wood drying out over time, and so if you were to analyze any of these, well, not this building here, but if you analyze the roof structure of the old rec center, the old seminary building, and the Beck home, none of those would meet current code requirements for snow loading. In fact, we tell you don't insulate those types of buildings because one of the things that saves them is that the heat escapes from the building and melts the snow on the roof. And so those are issues that we aren't addressing in this one, but we will comment on it. And I will throw in I'll make, well, not make up, but based on past experience, we'll put a multiplier, because I wasn't originally thinking of doing that, but after looking at these roofs, if you're gonna use them, because when you get done retrofitting them, you're gonna wanna say that they're good for 50 years, something like that. And it doesn't make sense to retrofit a building and then not up roof structures, for example. Now, the fact is, they've been here for 100 years, these buildings almost.
That one.
And so when you look at some of that, and me tell you that it's a bad structure, and you're essentially, you know, I'll have an old timer say, but it's been here 100 years. How can you say it's a bad building? But that's because there's large safety factors. And the fact is, heat escapes and melts the snow on the roof, and there's steep pitched roofs, and there's things to help them out. But they, in their current state, now this roof, you've got steel joist on this roof, and a fire station, you've got steel joist, and those are probably close to complying for the roof structures themselves. So that's a side note. But
So, okay, so back to this building, the intended, no, it's fine. Current use, it's kind of sporadic, some basketball games, some junior jazz types of activities. We have Holy Critique, which seems to actually be used more for that kind of an event than anything else. Kind of a crafts fair thing. Any other uses you guys can think of?
Who uses or operates the weight training area?
That was a offshoot. Is it still?
Fire department, we still go over and use it.
so
There's stands, there's youth dances and things like that sometimes.
And Bill mentioned to me that you lease it out to a private school to use it as their gymnasium. Is that true?
Yeah, Dion would know that.
During the school year, they'll come in bad weather, inclement weather.
So
Is that John Hancock? Who is that?
They bust me in. So I can't remember. It's not John.
Oh,
So that's kind of the uses that it's for now. Okay, next to that one is the small building that's on the west side of it. We've been told that the exterior looks pretty good, but I don't know that anybody's actually examined the whole building as a structure and looked at it to see if it couldn't be remodeled, cleaned up, and used for offices. So we're interested in the safety of that building as well.
unfortunately for today, because we just took the pictures today, we'll do a meeting when we've got our report all put together. We'll come back and present our findings. And in that one, we'll show you some pictures up in the roof structure, and you can see how they're framed.
Okay.
It's like I said, it's been there, it's lasted, but obviously if you're going to use it for that, one of the things you want to do is energy efficiency things. You want to blow insulation up there, and because of that, and in fact, that one, I was surprised to find out that, you know how right now it's nice and symmetrical. It turns out that big classroom, that was an addition, was built at the same time that lean-to was in the back. When you get up there in the roof, you can see where they overbuilt the old roof to build that east
Yeah, we
room.
didn't know.
Forensic architecture and forensic engineering is kind of fun.
That is fun.
So that's good for us to know, and then you'll translate it to what that means.
Yeah, it just means it had an addition, and
It was built in 3 pieces, that's what it comes down to. Rather than being built as a single whole, it was built in multiple pieces at different times.
So you're analyzing both the outside structure and inside of all these facilities.
yeah. Right now, what we're doing is maybe I got a short little presentation, won't take too long. Let me go through this because the technique that we're using for the seismic part of the study, which is one of the emphasis of the RFP, we picked a particular method, which is appropriate for this level of design. But I wanted to briefly go over and explain to you a couple things on that, so if that's okay.
Are you connected now?
Yes.
Okay.
And
And he's got your laptop there.
yeah, so we'll have that. So, okay. So, one of the things that we talk about always is you don't worry about earthquakes if you live in a part of the country where there's no earthquakes. And this is just a little representation. This is these stars that you see here is when there was a last. They went through the Utah Geological Society went through and they did trenching along the different faults and they've dated them, and they can tell when the earthquakes, when they had a movement last time they had movement, and so along the different segments, you can see when they were. So you can see they're very active now. The average works out to be roughly about 1,300 years when you take the composite.
Wait, use that point on the screen.
So, but So and then Provo, the Provo segment was the most recent to move. So that's good news for you, because supposedly, theoretically, you're the longest out from the next time it moves. The problem is your neighbor to the north of you, Salt Lake. If you look at this spacing, you'll see that we're there. Now, there's a plus or minus 500 years on it. So we're going to have an earthquake any day in the next 500 years. But that gives you an idea there. Want to go to the next slide? And this is just some evidence along the Wasatch Fault. Here I am, structural engineer, so you have to humor me for a minute. This is, where 13th East is. This is along there. You can see that hill, that fault from the aerial photo. You can see where the fault is. This is up at the mouth of Big Cottonwood or Little Cottonwood. I can't remember which, but you can see the faults there. This is up. We like this one because Bowen Collins does a lot of water treatment, sewer treatment plants, and this is a water treatment plant right below the fault line that's there.
That was well planned. That was well planned.
Yeah.
Cheap land.
When I was in college, I remember one of my senior lectures, they had a guy come in and he had this overlay, and he says, okay, and he took the Salt Lake Valley and he did an overlay. He says, okay, these are the places you don't want to live because you're close to the fault. Then he put it on, the old days when you had the overlay thing, and these are the parts you don't want to live because of a landslide. These are the parts that you don't want to live because of a faction. These are the parts you don't want to live in because of flooding hazards. When you got done, there's just little pockets left where there wasn't any hazards. So we had to plan to live with them. Now, seismic upgrades. When we think about seismic upgrades, we think about them for these different reasons. We worry about life safety. We worry about financial loss, functional loss. If it is, in an emergency, his fire department to be able to get out the doors, and if the parapets fall off, he's got to clear out. Even if the building was to stand, he's got to clear the stuff out of the way and to be functional. And then, you have a community that you've got old buildings, and there are different emotions about old buildings, and so historic preservation is another reason for seismic upgrades. I throw this in here just for fun. This is the Code of Hammurabi, if you're familiar or heard of it before. It's from 2200 BC. This is the very first building code. You see here, if a builder built a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and the house which he built fall in and killed its owner, then the builder shall be put to death. So, and here you have it, the owner's son's killed, then the builder has to have his son put to death. And unfortunately here on the slave, just has to replace the slave. So, but anyway, go ahead. These are local earthquakes, unreinforced buildings. All 4 of these buildings are unreinforced masonry. And this is just showing some of the typical damage that happens from unreinforced masonry. This was 1983. This one's 2 school children were killed on the way to school because the parapets fell off and killed a couple school children. Okay, this was in Cache Valley. There was a parapet up here that fell. And then next picture. And this fell on the lower roof of the building below it.
Is the parapet essentially a wall?
Yeah, it's for example, on the only one that you have a parapet on is the older portion of the fire station.
Okay.
You do have a parapet on these, but they're so short for this portion that they're really not a problem. But those parapets are unreinforced, and they're very vulnerable in an earthquake. You have a list of priorities when we look at them. And sometimes you're only interested in, because of limited budgets, you only want to hit the hot buttons. Bracing parapets is a hot.
And parapets are one of those things, they're what's classified as a non-structural component that needs to be braced. And if you go back through the records of earthquakes, deaths and injuries the vast majority of them are caused by things falling off of buildings and hitting people. Not because the building itself fell down and collapsed people, though that does happen, but pieces falling off of buildings outside or inside and striking people and either killing or injuring them. And so that's what Steve's getting at here is we're talking about these pieces that and identifying those dangers and mitigating them. That's one of the high people get.
Next one. This was a couple years ago. You might remember the Wells, Nevada earthquake. This is their main street before and after the earthquake. Again, it's just the front masonry walls. Buildings are standing, but you would not want to.
And these are all like 5.6 points.
These aren't big earthquakes. Okay, this was a couple of earthquakes. One was in Washington, one was in California. These are school rooms. And you know, you think about elementary school with those light fixtures falling. That's you know, in a place like this, every one of these light fixtures, for example, there should be a lot of people don't think of this, but there should be an individual suspension at each one of the quarters. It shouldn't be just sitting on the ceiling grid, and lots of times that happens. Next one, these are ceilings we're talking about. This one was in a school auditorium. It's an old plaster ceiling. This is really relevant for your old rec center, because when you get up there and you look at that old ceiling's an old plaster ceiling. So even if the building were to survive the earthquake, the ceiling that you have in that would come down. And if there's people in there, that heavy ceiling can cause some major problems. Sometimes in an office space, I don't know if anyone got killed by that, but it's a mess. Now this is this is called a hazardous run, and what they've done is they take off based off the county property records and the ages of the buildings. They have a database and they estimate how much loss there would be in an earthquake from that. And so this is for a Provo earthquake. It'd be a 7.2, and every red dot represents a million. Want to hit that again? Okay. And so this is the estimated financial losses from a 7.2 earthquake. And you'll see for Utah County, structural damage is $1 billion. You'll see here non-structural. Now non-structural, we're talking about what Dave was talking about earlier: parapets, ceilings, chimneys, storage racks, that type of. You'll see that that's actually a bigger dollar number. And then if you look at the total loss in Utah County, they'd have that about $7.8 billion. And this number here also includes lost wages because businesses are not functioning. So anyway.
Why is the Utah County number bigger than the Salt Lake number?
This one is they've run this for every county. I happen to grab, because we're down here, I grabbed this one. This is one, and I could go on they give coordinates for it, but this is on the earthquake that happened here. There's another one that for the Salt Lake fault, and then more damage is up there. So it's local to.
So if the epicenter was in Provo.
Yes,
Oh, I see.
exactly.
Provo segment of the fault.
Okay.
Yes. But the important thing is now, okay, that's flipped these numbers. That's assumed that the epicenter now is in Salt Lake. Earthquake's not as likely to happen, right? Well, let's say it's the Salt Lake one. Then all of a sudden these two numbers flip. Well, you're now stuck with that number. So
Still a good thing.
yes, it's still a big number.
And that's only 7.2.
Yeah.
Has
And
there ever been a
7.2 is probably
7.2?
that's about as big as you probably can have.
In the history of Utah, has there ever been an earthquake like that?
Historically, that's based on trench data, because what they, it's just estimations. But what they do is they look at earthquakes that are currently, and then when they look at the trench data, they look at how far the ground moved in the trench data that the geologists have done, and based on the amount that it moved, that tells the energy of the nations. So that estimation is realistic based on the trenching data. Okay. All right, now, this is gonna be more relevant to, I just didn't blow this side of the background, just because I'm a seismic guy. One of the things that we need to establish for each one of your buildings is a performance objective. How do you want the building to perform in an earthquake? We have a building target, we talk about the overall damage, we talk about the structural performance of the building and the non-structural, because those are both very important components. Okay, the first one is what we call collapse prevention. That's the lowest level. And the goal in collapse prevention is get the people out alive. Okay, the building, you're holding the building together enough so that you minimize casualties. The building's going to be an economic loss when you're done. You're just going to bulldoze it. There's no saving the building, but you've protected lives. And so the next one, life safety. This is the standard that you build new buildings for residents. We typically meet the life safety provisions. And you have, there's actually some permanent drift. The buildings allow to reflect some. You can see cracks in the building, but they'd be building cracks that would not lead to structural collapse. And most likely they're repairable. Okay, next. We have this category, which is called immediate occupancy. This means the structure is not damaged, it's safe. In fact, the fire department's probably I don't know if you're wearing seismic, you come back after an earthquake and you red tag them or yellow tag them or green tag them. You can do that. And this would be a building, it'd be green tag, it's safe to occupy. There's no drift, the structure retains its original strength, but the equipment's secure, but it may not operate because it's safe to occupy, but it's not usable. Your utilities aren't there. You don't have a backup generator. You don't have a secondary water supply. So it's not usable. And then you have the final category, which is called operational. And now the operational, structurally, these two buildings perform exactly the same. The difference is that this one has standby power. Do you have a generator for your fire department? So even after an earthquake, even if we made his building strong enough that it can get out and service public, it is operational and he's down because he doesn't have backup power utilities. And so for each one of these buildings, obviously the fire department wants to be here at operational. Now the question would be for your other buildings, the rec center, the old seminary building, and the Beck home. If you chose to retrofit those, what point would you do these? Now, sometimes for assembly use facilities, they'll pick something like this rather than that. You need to tell us maybe life safety is good enough, or maybe you're saying, hey, if we get people alive and the building's total structural loss, we're okay with that. And so that's where we need, for the purposes of this study, I like to talk about each building.
One of the things that comes into play here is, from a code standpoint, is change in use. If a change in use is considered, for example, the seminary building becoming offices, that's a change in use. And typically codes will say, when you change the use of the building, then you have to bring it up to current codes, depending upon the intensity of use. Always, if you go to a more intense use, you have to bring it up to current codes. So that's a trigger that comes into play as well.
Now, most likely going from a seminary building to the classroom to an office building, that's actually a downgrade in risk because if it's not being used, so that's actually helps you out. The rec center was always an assembly type use. The Beck home,
you go from residential to office. If you did that would be definitely a change in use.
This building was converted from a storage or from a wood shop to a fire department. That should have been a trigger that would have mandated that it be upgraded to current code standards. That's something that's loosely enforced, and so obviously it didn't happen. How long has the fire department been here?
Since 89, 90.
So, yeah. See, that's new enough where ideally, that would have triggered an automatic seismic upgrade for that building, move the fire department into an old wood shop, because that's going up in hazard. But that's history, so. won't worry
Well,
about that.
it's history, but we are an offshoot of your information that you get back, your report will influence us as to how we reutilize what we currently, differently than what they're used today.
Well, the fact is that your fire department wants to be here, and it's not right now. And so that's just, that's where we're at. And so, okay. Let's go ahead.
So, sorry, Stephen, on that last slide, if we want the fire department up to operational, and that's the direction we give, you'll be able to give us an estimated cost to get it to operational, right? That's,
Yes.
okay.
And there will be additional code issues besides just the structural
Right.
that will come into play for that.
You have some functional uses of the space, sleeping quarters, and some of those things that are, that to be 100% code compliant, that we'll want to put some dollars at it. And so we'll talk about.
Yeah, because part one for us is making that determination. Part two then is if we're going to get it to that safety code wise, then we look at the remodel of the building to meet the current needs.
Yes.
So you're going to get us up to the point where we can look at that and say, it's just going to cost us X amount of dollars just to get us to code, not even touching anything else inside.
When we talk about code, there's structural code, but there's then also other code issues that are that have to do with life safety and just building code requirements. And that's why I'm here, is because I bring that up a piece of the file.
So is it too much to ask, this is kind of a theoretical question, but is it too much to ask to have kind of a menu and say, this is the estimation of what it would cost to collapse prevention level, and this is what it would cost to get to life safety, rather than have each of these four, we want each of these four buildings to say, this is the ballpark, kind of give us a matrix of options, is that?
I can kind of do that for you, and I'll explain to you how, okay?
Okay.
And it's actually the methodology that we've chosen to use for these facilities that's actually the click of the mouse to tell the difference.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
So literally, so we can easily do that for the seismic part. I don't know about the other code issues involved, but for the seismic portion, it's steady. So, so in reading the RFP and based on the walkthrough and questions we asked during the walkthrough, it came to pretty clear that you were really at the master planning wanting the 10,000 foot elevation view of these buildings. So that's what we've proposed doing. The methodology that we've proposed on is the rapid visual screening method. The picture I've got here is for the second edition. It actually issued just the third edition, which was January 1st year. So it's still a very active application. In fact, if you know how to, there's an app for your phone that you can go through and do you need to be trained on it, but there is actually an app for your phone for this method. In fact, FEMA paid some money to do a trial study of it for Salt Lake County, where they went through and did a couple hundred buildings. So this is the red digital. This is one that it's nice because it's a national standard. And want to click and when you get done, it's got a very simple scoring procedure. It looks at, I did this based on experience. I'm going to update this now. I did this a couple weeks ago before I walked through the buildings, even though I think I'm not going to change too much the answer on this.
No, we can't see it anyway.
Yeah, but it's a very simple thing. And to go with it, they had the Canyon document. I didn't put the slide up for it, which was this document, which is FEMA 156. It's a cost estimating tool that we're using for this project. And what it does is it's a database where they've got about 1,000 buildings where they went through and they cataloged the seismic upgrade cost. And they marked whether it was a high seismicity or low seismicity. To answer your question, they looked at the immediate occupancy and life safety and that, and went through a statistical model and developed the cost based on the statistical model. So we're not actually gonna be doing a cost estimate based on this exact bill. It's gonna be comparing database of buildings for an average cost. But for this level of study, that seems appropriate for you because it would be, our fairly have to be to get a detailed one, it would be 3 to 4 times higher than what we had proposed. At this point, it didn't seem like that was warranted.
Thank you.
Now, I did want to talk about, just for your educational purposes for the future, we have a whole smattering of options when you get into the more detailed analysis. One of them is simply to do a comparison to the buildings to the International Building Code, which is the one that's required for new buildings. And so that one is an option. We normally recommend it for existing buildings, but that is chapter 34 in the building code actually deals with existing buildings. And then they've got a separate one, International Existing Building Code. This one's an important one. You want to click the slide because it's got some nice appendice chapters. The first one of those, which is chapter 1, deals specifically with URM buildings. And so it's got a nice procedure for dealing specifically with these types of buildings. Negative about this one is it is a collapse prevention level of design. But if you got a building that you're just with collapse prevention, that is an option. And then they have a bunch of other chapters in there.
So that, the old rec center has a bearing wall?
They're masonry, yeah, they're
So
called
just
unreinforced.
just the outside?
If you want to go back, yeah. We call them, you'll see we'll use as an acronym URM for unreinforced masonry. So,
Well, I was thinking of the bearing wall was just going down the center and
Actually, wall is very wall. Any wall that carries itself would be
a load bearing. Okay.
this one here is a load bearing wall. That corridor wall looks like you did it. There was an addition where you actually, at one time, I don't know how long ago it was, but the north of that wall was actually an addition to this building. You can see that real clearly when you go out here on the elevation. You can see where they toothed the bricks in. And when you're up on the roof, you can see the expansion joint. Then these are probably the best codes for site. I don't have a picture of the newest one. They've actually combined these two in a single code. But these are what they call performance-based codes. And these are engineering-wise, they're more expensive because there's more involved in the engineering side. But the advantage of these is they typically result in lesser construction costs when you use these. And so these are good ones. That just gives you a menu that knows.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
So I just wanted to throw that out there. So that, let's say there was one building that you decided that you wanted to take for, and you get done, you say, well, we need to do that. We would come back and we would pick one of these other methods. We go through and actually do a more detailed analysis if there was a specific building you wanted to do. And that's gives you an idea.
I heard there's a company in Salt Lake City that comes in on these historical buildings and they actually take the brick down. They take all of the brickwork down and then clean it and then put it up to current code. Have you heard of anything like that?
I haven't. That would be so extraordinarily expensive.
That's what I was going to ask if that would be.
I've never heard of that. There's a lot of options to reinforce unreinforced masonry. What you're talking about is an extreme preservation restoration technique that you would use for a national historic asset.
For example, one of the things that I've done quite a bit, did this on Old Main up at Utah State University. And if you went to the U of U, there's James Talmadge building at the U of U. It's a technique they use on that one and then other buildings where you actually go in and you remove the inner life of brick, and you come back in with shotcrete, gunite, and you put reinforcing steel on it, and you come back on the inside and you end up with a reinforced concrete all the way around the outside of the building. I mean, that's a very good method.
Done that a number of times.
Hmm?
We've done that a number of
Yeah.
times.
You can come back into, no, there, and that, right now it's not the time, but you know, as you look at the old record, building like that, you would probably come in and add some supplementary steel columns at each one of those pilasters in the building, because those piers are tall and narrow. They're not gonna be strong enough. Now, shotcrete would be a way, or we could come back with steel columns, and you could do steel frames and something like that. Something like the Beck home or the old seminary building, those typical retrofit scheme on those is simply coming in on the inside of the building and filling out the walls. And then you put plywood on that. And it's got several advantages. Then we anchor that really good to those exterior walls. And that gives you, and then we tie, in every case, one of the big weaknesses in these buildings is the roof structure isn't tied well to the walls. And so a big thing that we do is make sure the roof is tied to the walls. But then when you, like I said, the seminary building, you would do pretty simple construction. You come in on the inside, build a new stud wall all the way around the perimeter, put plywood on it, anchor it to the wall. And then at the same time, it gives you a new place to run electrical. So you can rerun the electrical in these older buildings because you're at that stud wall, and you can put insulation in those walls. Most of these, they're just brick walls, and there's no insulation. And so you lose a little bit of space because you're putting in a 2x. In fact, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Old Spring City. That's the method we're using. They've got the old 2-story schoolhouse that we've been working on it for about 2002. It's one of these where this little bit of dollars and we spend it, and then we get a few more dollars and we spend it. And we've done 6 phases now and retrofitting it. We're finally done with the structural part, ready to do finishes. But
what about the exterior of this building, particularly front, is where it's really noticeable. You've got those 2 separating cracks that kind of, they're not as visible lower in the building, but as you get up higher, you can definitely see the separation. How do we bring that back in?
Now, most of the time we do just something really simple. We repoint them. You go in and you route out all the mortar joints, and you put mortar in on the
You
face.
don't pull them back in, you just stabilize everything in place. And
So it remains.
it will remain, one of the things in that building, water is the enemy of every stone and masonry built, stone or brick or terracotta building. Water is the biggest enemy. And some of the things that are going on over there is you've got voids in the mortar, the water's getting into the wall system, and then you get freeze thaw, you get just water erosion. You have quite a few bricks that have been eroded. You've got sprinklers that are spraying on that is a big problem. I mean, that's a great way to destroy a building if that's what your goal is, spray sprinklers on it. And so the biggest thing from an appearance standpoint, but also a stabilizing the exterior envelope of the building standpoint, is to come in and you route out the mortar and repoint the brick. At the same time, you replace bricks which are severely damaged or missing. And so that you bring the whole to an original condition insofar as being tight and sound and weatherproof. And then you, along with that, we would hope to mitigate the environmental factors that are exacerbating the problem. For example, sprinklers that spread the building.
But as far as, do the cracks indicate there's been separation?
The cracks
Or is it just the mortar that's gone?
The cracks indicate some differential settlement, and Stephen can speak more to that. It's not, nothing, I don't think anything we've seen is unusual for a building that age and of that construction type.
Yeah, it looks uglier than it is. You want to repoint them, you want to get them back weather tight. most of the time, they didn't get the foundation compacted well enough when they built it back 100 years ago. Well, now it's had years of the soil sitting on there, and so the weight of the building, so the chances of it continuing to move have been reduced just because it's been sitting there for that. So so once we fill it again, your chances of it.
So, I mean, there are things, if there's a risk of, continuing settlement, you can do things, you can do it with peers to help brace the building against settlement, if that's perceived as a risk.
But you'll let us know whether that risks or not.
Yeah.
Or if it's just facade.
I went through and looked closely at the foundation. You don't see signs of current movement. Like I said, most of that's probably older. And so through and do what Dave was describing where you're repointing it. You want to do all of it because the mortar's going to not want to match. And so it's not inexpensive to do that. And then, Dave, would you go through to put a waterproofing on these?
Not necessarily, no. Part of the trick is to select the right mortar. You need mortar that matches the strength of the brick. If you come back with a modern mortar on antique brick, frequently the mortar is stronger and harder than the brick. And because buildings move and flex naturally, the weakest point is what's going to give, and it's going to be the brick, and the mortar will stay tight. And you'll just see bricks chip out and break out, and you frequently see that when somebody comes back and replaces old mortar with new, without considering mortar strength. So selecting the right strength of materials as a whole system is a critical aspect of that, to preserve the building and restore it to its original weather tightness.
In the new mortar, you'd probably put waterproof additives that you add to the mortar that would, because as much as we like to say, we can talk about not the sprinkler system building today, but 15 years ago, everyone's going to be going out of the room and forgotten that, and something new's going to come along. So
The other thing that happens is putting water right into the ground adjacent to the building. If there is a potential for settlement, that tends to exacerbate it. So we would want to look at how much moisture is in the soil. And this is at a much more adult level than what we're talking about for this study. But ultimately, when you're doing that analysis, you can say, we want to knock water right next to the building because it enhances the problems. When we did the restoration on this is the place monument, one of its problems was they had spring putting water right on to that structure. And so what we did is we pulled all of the plantings out from immediately around it and removed the water. And that solved a huge fraction of the problem.
So do we need to define what the uses are, or are you going to base it off of the current use?
Current use.
yeah, but if you know, well, I guess that doesn't matter. What we can do, like I said, it's so easy for us to tell you what the cost will be for each one. We can not worry about which use you're going to have, and then you can decide.
From a structural standpoint, that's true. One of the things I want to point out is that while structurally you have a number of different levels to choose from, and you have different codes that can be applied different ways to fit the building and the intended use. From a standpoint of life safety, other than seismic and accessibility for ADA, there's one standard that we measure against, and that's current code. And so my part of the report will tell you what features of the existing building do not comply with those current requirements, and identify a scope to bring them into compliance, or identify them as not feasible, which is appropriate in historic buildings, to bring up. For example, the building code makes allowances for major structural elements. If you would have to tear out major structural elements to meet a current requirement, then you're probably not going to be able to do that. But if there are, you still have to maintain a reasonable approximation of the current code. Make sure that if you can't get people into this room, then there better be a restroom they can get into. And so forth. And so those are the things that I'm looking at.
What about like, future growth? Like this, like the fire station. Let's say you come back and say, we can do this and this, but we got living quarters sitting up here that maybe don't belong, right? So what about add-on?
That's not part of our scope, as I understand it.
So mathematically then, if I understand what you guys are saying, you're gonna evaluate the structural integrity of what's existing. You're gonna look at bringing it to, or at least identifying what it will cost to bring it to current code. If we were to have a phase 2 where we wanted to change the use, all costs would already be considered because the base part of code,
Right.
it's gonna be going from there to the next use.
Right. What we're gonna do is, there's gonna be, the edges on what we do are gonna be fairly fuzzy because of the lack of detail, the lack of finite detail. And so we'll give you a range, as little as or as much as. And then, depending upon what your ultimate goal is, for example, Steve showed the level of structural performance, the 4 levels, which level do we pick? Well, the higher you go up on that scale, the more costly it gets.
Right.
At least usually.
So are we going to determine for you what each building should be brought to?
I don't think we, originally, I had that as something we were just talking about, but because of Ben's question, I think we can tell you from a seismic viewpoint, because his costs are fixed, they're not gonna vary. The seismic ones do vary which one. But like I said, because of the statistical database I'm using, it's very easy for me to give you the cost if you keep it at immediate occupancy, or if it's high safety, or if you go to operation. And that's just a line item, and so we can give you each of those numbers, so we don't have to make that decision.
Unfortunately, it becomes some kind of a political decision as we determine whether we call bodies out or whether we're just showing them how to get out, right?
Exactly.
Now, that's it. You know, in the final report, you maybe don't want to have that many options. This is going to be a report that's going to be open to the public. You may want to define it, and so we're not giving that many options, and we have a different one. That need to tell us what you want. We can give you the full option, or we can pick one for each building.
As a case.
You'll get the matrix, you'll bring it back to the council. They can look at the matrix on just the structural side or the seismic side,
Yes.
and then make that determination. Okay, we want this in the final report that shows the whole matrix, or we know for sure fire station needs to be this level. We aren't even going to consider this level, or whatever, and then that can be in the final report. But there'll be another meeting here where you'll kind of have some information that the council can kind of give further instruction.
You know, one kind of interesting data point that I intend to include in the report, and Steve had to figure out how to include it, that after the Northridge quake, we had the quake in San Francisco, they had the Northridge quake in LA. And there was a seismic report that was being done on the San Francisco quake that was not quite finished when the Northridge quake hit. And so before they published, took a bunch of data from the Northridge quake and they updated the report. And the fascinating thing about that report was that it concluded that it takes about $1 million of investment to save one life in URM, unreinforced masonry buildings, on average. In other words, for every $1 million you spend on URM buildings, you save one life if there's an earthquake. And the report projected that if we were to take that same amount of money, you know, hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars that can be spent on URM buildings, and were to invest them in emergency services that get used every day, the number of lives saved per $1 million in death would be many times that. And I think there's a potential, I mean, we have to get into our study, but I believe there's a potential here where you can say, if we take this $1 million and invest it in our fire department, we'll have a fire department, a fire station, and infrastructure, which is gonna be saving lives every single day. Rather than invest, if you invest the same money in the rec center, you only get one life per $1 million if there's an earthquake. And so that's the kind of thing that you folks can weigh, evaluate, and make a determination on. But it's something that I was very surprised, it's very esoteric data, and we'll have to boil it down so it makes sense, but that was the thing that struck me as being really amazing, is how many lives you can save if you say, we're not going to do this, we're going to invest that same money here.
Okay. You guys have any questions?
So just so I can kind of recap in my own mind, we have the seismic cost, which Stephen's going to work on the code cost. Those are going to marry so that at one point we're going to have a cost for each building depending on what we choose on the seismic side of things. And then to Eric's point, that doesn't include any new construction, add-ons, remodel. This is all just getting our building to a place where we can say, all right, now we can consider remodeling it.
Well, and I think that's important because what I understand the purpose of this whole study is you're deciding whether to save the building. One of the things you're trying to decide. No reason to be looking at future uses until you know whether you can economically retrofit.
That's exactly what we're looking for. That's the key. And then in some cases, we're not currently using buildings that are resources that are city. And we may want to be able to use them. Or we may need to remove them so that something else can be put in its place.
My intention for the Beck House evaluation is going to say, if this remains as a city asset, what would it take to be able to use it? And obviously, what the city needs is office and public interaction space.
Right.
And so, I think the only meaningful report that I can do on this, what are the circumstances, what are the conditions in the home now that would prevent that from happening? Because using it as a current use for, it's actually a 3-unit residential, well, yeah, that's current use. That's what it would have been before the city took it over. And that's not realistic for you folks. And so, what does that mean? The other side of that for all of these buildings is that they're all in the historic register, in a historic district. And what the state historic preservation officer may have to say about the intentions regarding these buildings. And that's something that we'll also need to include in the report.
Good. I think that summarizes it well. I don't have any more.
One comment I wanted, this is just kind of, again, broad philosophical things to think about, but over the last few years, we've had this debate in our city, and it's been a healthy debate, at times it's been a heated debate over, can we rebuild? Can we retrofit? Does it make economic sense? And just broadly speaking, my desire for your report, and what I love that Stephen said was that he would get us lots of data to make decisions. I think my hope, and I suspect it's the hope of most of us, is that we'll get objective, data-driven, unbiased data, information that we can use. Because I think you're gonna have people scrutinize your reports. They're gonna want to see. There are a lot of people who love each of these buildings. There are a lot of people that are anxious to see new construction. There's a lot of different opinions. And so what we want, what we're hoping for, is objective information.
And that's our goal. It certainly is my goal.
Good. Timing wise, you've already been crawling around.
Yeah, we've done that.
What do you anticipate as far as getting back
we-
together?
Yeah, for the draft report, and then report back, so that would be just before, just after July 4th, we would have somewhere in that time frame, come back, sit down, report with you those findings, and then let you stew on it, and then we put together a final report.
You take your comments and whatever comments you have. For example, if you wanted to settle on certain assumptions as a baseline, that we would then tie those into the report and give you a final that reflected your comments and needs.
So it's feasible we could have this done mid-July?
Yes.
I think what we're hoping is the next meeting would be the week of July 6th. That's a Monday.
Yeah, 6 would be the draft.
That'd be the draft. And
What
then
about the final
we'll
report?
say 2 weeks after that or 3 weeks.
So end of July.
We would need to receive your comments, and then it would take us a week or so to amend
Will that be a public meeting like this one too?
Yeah, I think it can take to present your findings in either.
that. We have 4 buildings we have to address. Usually it's just 1 building, maybe 2. We've got 4 buildings, so it's quite close.
So we'll probably have a separate meeting like we did now, and it'd be a public meeting. Okay.
Public outside of city council.
Public meeting open like this.
Well, if the council still be in your
They're
capacity,
still reporting to the
that's
council.
right.
but
Then it will be an
public
open
is
meeting. Yeah.
But it wouldn't be public, it would be city council.
We wouldn't do it that Tuesday night.
It would be Tuesday night. Well, the 2 hours worth of presentations.
So we could do another Wednesday at 4 o'clock on July 8th if everything.
Unless that's the only thing on the agenda.
Yeah,
And then that turns into an 8
That's
hour.
just kind of the, I mean, I know some people would come to this time, and that's kind of scheduled, but.
Perhaps we could make it.
We could do it at 6, yeah. I mean, we can make it an evening meeting if that's an issue.
One of the things that usually happens on a project like this is that the city or the owner, whether it's the city or whomever, will establish a steering and identify stakeholders from the various organizations and from the citizenry. And it's that committee that will provide feedback to whom we will go with questions. If we have questions, as we do our report, we usually will respond to the questions. It's also that committee who will provide feedback on the draft report. The sense I have meeting with you here is that this is the committee, your steering committee, as you intended to be.
For purposes of this kickoff, this is the steering committee. If the council wants to remain in that role, then that's what it's going to be.
Are there other people?
There's a committee being formed right now that's called the Public Safety Building Committee, who will be very interested in the results of this report.
Will they be actively engaged in commenting on the report and start feedback on the report?
They could be, by the time we have, if it's July 6th, yeah, they can be functional and ready to comment.
One of the challenges is getting enough people from different viewpoints and perspectives on the project to participate actively, identify them and get them actively participating, while not having so many people that you can't make a decision. And that's one of the things that we encourage our clients to do is to get their arms around this. You've got 4 buildings, so you've got probably a bigger challenge in that regard than most.
So you've seen other committees, what's the typical size?
Let's take the building at the university as an example. You would have the university administration, probably the vice president or the facilities who would lead it. You would have people from their maintenance department. You would have people from all the departments that occupy the building and use the building. If there's a donor involved, there would be a donor. And you may have somebody from the student council who would all represent the students, all the stakeholders. And if it's an historic building, then you may have people from the community at large as well.
Our donors would be the citizens.
We are the owners.
Yeah. Because that's as an example, that's the kind of thing. So you're talking about 5 to 10 people. If it gets over 10 people, it gets really hard to get down to brass tacks and make decisions. Say, here are the data points, option 1, option 2, option 3. Make a decision on one of those. With more than 10 people, it gets hard to make that happen. It can happen, but it's hard.
So the proposed committee that will be seated this upcoming Tuesday is a 9-member committee it's very deliberately by design having opposite viewpoints in its structure. And so it is a group that will discuss to be formed in very short order, and I think it would be healthy and valuable to have the two of you interact with that committee. I don't know if that's timing or the way to make that happen, but I think that.
Yeah, maybe there, we're gonna have questions. So if we submit questions to the city and that committee is part of the response to those questions. What you might want to do is say, get one or two people from that act as representatives from that committee to the committee as a whole that's overseeing this project, so that that committee is represented in this decision-making process.
Maybe we could take three from there, and what we say to you and the two departments.
We can do that.
For example, we don't know each one of these buildings, what is the historical importance of these buildings to the community? That's a question we don't.
That's what we're gonna look to the community to respond to that.
We don't know.
Well,
One day it's tear the building down, next day it's please save the building.
with what you described, I think you're going to give us the end result is a list of costs. One from the save, building, and here are the 9 different matrix points, or in this case it's 15, whatever it is, right? And then there's flat fees for the architectural piece to bring them to code. I think that the weight of historical value and preservation falls into the political arena in this case. So it may be best to isolate you from
That
that particular.
And we would hope to give you objective data
Right.
that's useful for decisions. You can tell your people, your electorate, if you will, taxpayers, if we spend this much in this way, this is the result we get. If we take that same money and spend it this way, this is the alternate result. Which best reflects the values of the city?
Yeah, I'm thinking about what we've done in the past and what we're trying to accomplish here. It's best we can keep you focused in a neutral way, in an unbiased way. You're presenting us with data on costs to accomplish the job.
Yes.
Irrespective of feelings or values, I mean, it becomes a very data-driven analysis.
The ultimate decision, though, that we've seen over.
Absolutely.
Because there's some of the intangibles associated with historic value to the community, to individual citizens. Historic value as defined by the state historic preservation officer. SHPO has a say about this as well.
Sure.
And so those intangibles ultimately become critical in the decision-making process. We can't control or manipulate those, but our job is to give you all the data necessary to make good decisions relative to those issues.
So you can present that in an unbiased, neutral way, and then we'll deal with the ramifications.
So in the code part of this, you will include what the state historical is recommending, or the requirements?
There are specific requirements. If you have a building which is on the National Register of Historic Places, and in this case, it's also in an historic district, it doesn't have a historic district, then before you can
This is
legally,
National Historic?
yes, all 4 buildings are on the National Historic Register.
I didn't know.
Those plaques that are on the buildings, that's what that's about.
All 4?
And then this district, this is a National Historic District, so even if the buildings weren't on the register themselves, they would still be subject to certain laws and rules because they're in the district. And so what happens is if the end day, you really need to take a building down, it's historic and is in a district, then you have to do some negotiation with the state historic preservation officers for what you're going to do to mitigate that loss. And there are things you can do. We looked at an old antique port of entry building up on the Canadian border, that there was just no way, because of where it was, we couldn't even pick it up and move it anywhere else. And so we went through the list of, well, if we can't make it work here where it is, which probably wasn't gonna work, and if we can't take it and sell it to somebody or give it to somebody or have it preserved in a new location, then these are the things we have to do to document it and preserve its memory and so forth in that regard. And so that's the kind of information you will provide as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, any other comments or questions? No?
Go to.
We're excited to have you.
Scott, anything?
No.
Right, well, we look forward to meeting with you again. Right now, we'll set a tentative date of 7/6. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and organize our other group, and then we'll figure out the interaction there for the steering
Do
group.
you know through whom we're going to submit our questions? Inquiries?
Well, I think our point of contact, Scott, for questions.
Okay.
So we'll be pointed in the right direction depending on what the questions are. So. And you have my cell number now.
Yes.
Call me.
I got your email down.
Yeah, very good.
Is it for us, we're expecting to submit our draft report in electronic format only, PDF?
Absolutely.
There's
Preferred.
There seems to be no reason to use, kill that many trees.
We're in the 21st century. We accept that format. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for coming.
Appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, make a motion to adjourn.
And I second it.
All in favor?
Hi.
Bye.
Thank you.
David, did you have a dad